Welcome to 21st Century Dating Decoded. We're making modern love simple. Get ready to decode your love life. Brought to you by Mingle.
Imagine this scenario. You go on a fantastic date.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. The conversation just flows effortlessly, the chemistry is absolutely electric, and you even share this lingering movie-perfect kiss at the end of the night.
The dream scenario.
Exactly. So you go home, you brush your teeth, you climb into bed, and you wait for that inevitable, I had a great time text. And you wait. And you wait.
And the clock is just ticking.
12 hours go by. Then 24. Then 48. Absolute deafening silence. Now, if you are like most people, your brain instantly goes into this full-blown fight-or-flight panic.
Oh, absolutely. Total meltdown.
Your chest tightens, your stomach drops, and you start obsessively reviewing, every single word you said over dinner. But what if I told you that this agonizing panic actually has almost nothing to do with the person you just met?
That is the crazy part.
Right. What if I told you that your reaction is entirely dictated by a primal survival code programmed into your brain hundreds of thousands of years ago, and, combined with a modern digital landscape that is actively weaponizing your biology against you?
A brutal combination.
It really is. So, welcome to a very special 21st Century Dating Decoded deep dive. We are calling this exploration Beyond the Crumbs, Dating, Boundaries, and Not Settling for Less. I'm Alice, your host.
And I'm Zach.
Today we have an absolute mountain of source material to synthesize for you. We are pulling from clinical therapy guides, cutting-edge attachment science, intensely honest internet culture retrospectives, and incredibly ancient Neoplatonic philosophy.
Yeah, we're really going everywhere with this one.
Leaving no stone unturned. Because our mission today is to decode the biological and psychological truths hiding beneath the endless stream of modern dating buzzwords. We want to understand what is literally happening inside your nervous system when a romantic connection suddenly goes, completely sideways.
It's such a critical mission, honestly. Primarily because we are collectively operating under this massive cultural illusion right now.
What do you mean by illusion?
Well, if you look around at the dating landscape in 2026, you see algorithmic matchmaking, AI-driven compatibility scores, asynchronous video dating, all these endless apps promising to optimize your search for a soulmate.
Right, it feels super futuristic.
Exactly. We look at all this technology and we assume that the fundamental nature of romance has been rewired. We think we're playing an entirely new game governed by new rules. But the reality is far more sobering.
Because it's not new at all, is it?
Not even a little. Beneath that glothy high-tech veneer, our ancient limbic systems are running the exact same survival algorithms they did on the prehistoric savanna. The screens and the interfaces have changed, but the primal biology driving our behavior and our suffering, frankly, has not shifted a single inch.
I am so glad you brought up the idea that we think we're playing a new game, because that perfectly sets up our first major theme.
The buzzwords.
The buzzwords. Oh my gosh, if you spend 5 minutes on social media, you are just bombarded with this hyper-specific, trendy slang. Generation Z and the internet at large are constantly inventing new vocabulary to describe dating behaviors, making it sound like, human psychology has radically mutated in the last 5 years.
It really hasn't.
Right. But looking at our sources, specifically this really fascinating retrospective on modern dating culture, it turns out these new trends are actually centuries-old social dynamics. They've just been given a trendy rebrand for the digital age.
A fresh coat of paint on a very old house.
Exactly. So one of our sources calls it the BS decoder, and I want to run through this to translate these buzzwords back into their actual historical realities.
I think that's a vital first step. Stripping away the jargon is incredibly clarifying because it removes the mystique. When we use novel terminology, we trick our brains into thinking we're dealing with a novel threat, which just, increases our anxiety.
Yes, exactly. So let's start with the big one. The grandfather of modern dating terms, ghosting.
Ah, ghosting.
People talk about ghosting like it is a modern epidemic, right? Like a unique symptom of the smartphone era. You go on a few dates, maybe you become physically intimate, you think things are progressing beautifully, and then poof.
They vanish.
They vanish. They don't answer texts, they don't answer calls, their social media goes dark to you. It feels incredibly modern because of the digital blackout. But what is this, really? If we look back to the 1980s or the 1950s or the 1890s, what was this called?
It was simply called not calling or, slipping out the back door. The behavior itself is just a manifestation of extreme conflict avoidance.
Right.
Human beings, generally speaking, are neurobiologically wired to avoid causing direct, face-to-face emotional pain. Because in an ancestral tribal setting, causing conflict could lead to social ostracization.
You could get kicked out of the tribe.
Exactly. So people have always looked for the easiest exit strategy that bypasses accountability. The only difference now is that the digital environment allows for a perfectly clean break with zero physical friction.
Because you don't have to worry about bumping into them at the local tavern, right?
Right, or the village well. The digital blackout makes the absence feel more absolute, more sudden, but the human mechanism driving it is identical. It is sheer cowardice, honestly, masked as convenience.
It is the exact same cowardice, just executed with a smartphone instead of a landline or a horse-drawn carriage.
Well said.
Okay, now what about Scrooging? This one always pops up in articles around November and December. It's defined as dumping someone right before the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
Online, it is framed as this incredibly cruel, Grinch-like, almost sociopathic trend. But our sources point out that historically, this was just considered pragmatic.
Yeah, from a clinical and historical perspective, this is a pragmatic termination based on resource allocation.
Resource allocation, that sounds so cold.
It sounds incredibly cold, but let's break down the mechanics. If a person knows deep down that a relationship has no long-term viability, approaching the holiday season forces a massive acceleration of investment.
Oh, like buying gifts.
Right. There's the financial investment of buying significant gifts. There's the immense emotional labor of integrating that person into your family gatherings, which carries a heavy social weight. And there's just the sheer psychological exhaustion of maintaining a charade of intimacy during a highly stressful time of year.
That makes total sense.
Historically, entering winter meant conserving resources. While we aren't exactly hoarding firewood anymore, the psychological principle remains. Terminating the relationship before that massive expenditure of social and emotional capital is an ancient self-preservation strategy. We just slapped a Dickensian name on it to make it sound like a new phenomenon.
That makes so much sense when you frame it around resource allocation. Okay, let's look at vulturing.
This is a fun one.
It's a deeply unsettling term. It describes someone who hovers on the periphery of a failing relationship. They watch from the sidelines, waiting for the official breakup so they can immediately swoop in and date the newly single person. We used to just call this waiting for a rebound or looking for sloppy seconds, right?
We did. But what has fundamentally changed here is the scale and the ease of surveillance. This is where technology actually does act as an amplifier.
Because of social media.
Exactly. In the past, to vulture, you had to be embedded in the same physical community. You had to hear rumors from a friend of a friend that a couple was fighting. Today, social media allows for a globalized digital swoop. You don't need to be in the same city to know a relationship is crippled.
You just passively watch their Instagram stories.
Right. You notice the subtle absence of couples' photos. You see the vague, melancholic quotes they post. And the moment the digital status changes, you send that perfectly timed, commiserating direct message.
Hey, sorry you're going through a tough time. I'm here for you.
Exactly that. However, the underlying psychological reality hasn't changed. It is still a manifestation of low-value desperation and emotional hedging. You are trying to secure a mate at their most vulnerable moment because you lack the confidence to compete for them when they're fully secure.
Wow.
Frankly, actual vultures serve a vital ecological purpose. This behavior is just emotional opportunism.
I absolutely love that distinction. Actual vultures are useful. Okay, next on the BS decoder is breadcrumbing. This is perhaps the most insidious one, I think.
It's definitely one of the most painful.
So someone gives you just enough sporadic attention to keep you interested. They send a funny meme on a Tuesday. They like your photo on a Thursday. They send a text saying, we should totally grab coffee soon on a Sunday. But they never, ever commit to a specific time, place, or actual relationship. Historically, our sources say this is just playing it cool or keeping them keen. But why do people actually do this?
To understand breadcrumbing, we have to look at behavioral psychology, specifically the concept of intermittent reinforcement. If you look at B.F. Skinner's foundational experiments with pigeons.
Wait, pigeons?
Yes, pigeons. He found that if you give a pigeon a food pellet every single time it pecks a button, it will peck when it is hungry and stop when it is full. Pretty standard. But if you give the pigeon a pellet at random, unpredictable intervals, sometimes after one peck, sometimes after 20, the pigeon will peck the button obsessively, to the point of exhaustion.
Because the unpredictability spikes the dopamine.
Precisely. Unpredictability is the core driver of addiction. The breadcrumber is essentially turning you into that pigeon.
Oh, that is so manipulative.
It is. They maintain the connection, and they get the ego boost of your continued attention and validation while minimizing their own risk emotional investment. It is a highly effective regulation tactic for someone who is fundamentally avoidant.
They get all the perks with none of the risk.
Exactly. They get to feel desired, they get to feel like they have options without ever having to face the terrifying vulnerability of true intimacy. They are feeding you just enough to keep you on the hook, but never enough to sustain you.
It is so gross when you lay out the behavioral science like that. All right, finally, let's talk about kitten fishing. Not catfishing where you steal someone else's photos and invent a completely fraudulent identity, but kitten fishing.
Just the light version.
Right. This is when you use photos that are maybe 5 years old or heavily filtered. You pretend to read books you haven't read, or you slightly exaggerate your job title to sound more successful. Let's be real here. Hasn't that just been called dating since the dawn of time?
It absolutely has. It is standard social protocol. Human beings, like many species, are evolutionarily optimized to present the most polished, idealized version of themselves during an initial mate assessment. A peacock displays its feathers.
And a human curates their digital footprint.
Exactly. It's a mild, universally understood exaggeration used to manage the intense anxiety of a first encounter. The danger only arises when the gap between the kittenfish presentation and the reality is so vast that it breaks the foundational trust required to move forward.
Okay, so we have all these trendy terms: ghosting, scrooging, vulturing, breadcrumbing, kittenfishing, and we've established that the actual behaviors are older than dirt. So why do we bother inventing this entirely new lexicon? What purpose does it serve for us to label everything?
The clinical sources offer a really profound insight into this. These labels function as what psychologists call humiliation cushions.
Humiliation cushions.
Yeah, they act as emotional insulation in a modern digital dating market that is high stakes and highly ambiguous.
Wait, walk me through how a slang term cushions humiliation.
Think about the raw experience of rejection. If someone you really like suddenly stops talking to you, the immediate internalized narrative is, I am unlovable, I did something wrong, I am fundamentally flawed.
Right, you blame yourself.
That is a devastating psychological blow. But if you can categorize their behavior with a clinical-sounding or trendy internet label like ghosting or breadcrumbing, it externalizes the blame. It creates a psychological buffer.
Oh, I see.
You are no longer a deeply flawed person suffering the agony of personal rejection. You are simply the victim of a systemic cultural dating trend. The label takes the sting out of the personal failure. It allows you to go to your friends and say, ugh, I just got ghosted again.
Yeah.
Which frames you as a participant in a shared cultural frustration, rather than someone who is uniquely unlovable.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
I understand the psychological utility of the humiliation cushion, but I don't buy the idea that these trends are just like a harmless rebranding of old habits. If these are just ancient human behaviors, why do they feel so uniquely agonizing in the modern era?
That's a great question.
It feels to me like we are taking a crumbling, termite-infested foundation and just slapping a fresh, trendy coat of paint on it. We might laugh at a TikTok video explaining vulturing, but when you are actually on the receiving end of these behaviors in 2026, it doesn't feel like a shared cultural joke. It feels incredibly isolating. It hurts deeply. Why is the pain so acute now?
That is a phenomenal pushback. And honestly, your termite analogy is exactly the right way to look at this. The fresh coat of paint, the new vocabulary, is a distraction from the rock in the foundation. The pain you are describing is not coming from the phone screen.
No.
No, it isn't coming from the specific app you are using, and it certainly isn't mitigated by the trendy label. The pain is coming directly from your biology, clashing violently with the modern environment it was never, ever designed for.
What do you mean by that? How is the modern environment causing the biological clash?
So, in traditional historical dating structures, there were extensive social guardrails. If a man in a 19th century village courted a woman and then abruptly vanished without a word, there were immediate social consequences.
Right, everyone would talk.
Exactly. Her family would know, his family would know, the community would judge him, and his reputation would suffer. The community context mitigated the worst behavioral impulses because accountability was built into the physical environment. And the digital environment has completely stripped away those guardrails. You are now interacting with strangers who have zero ties to your physical community. They can act with absolute impunity. But, and this is the crucial part, your nervous system still expects those guardrails to exist.
Wow, so our brains haven't caught up.
Not at all. To truly understand why a delayed text feels like a physical blow to the chest, we have to look beneath the sociological trends and examine the actual architecture of that termite-infested foundation, the human limbic system.
And this brings us perfectly into the biological mechanics of dating, which is where things get so illuminating for me. We are diving into the work of therapist Figs O'Sullivan, who specializes in the architecture of attachment. He talks about a phenomenon that I think absolutely everyone listening has experienced. He calls it the calm weather trap.
It's such a brilliant concept.
It really is. Let's paint the picture. You just started dating someone new. You are in those early, intoxicating stages. Dopamine, which is the brain's reward chemical, is just flooding your system. Every time your phone buzzes with a notification from them, you get a literal chemical high.
Yep, the butterflies.
Right. You are discovering a new person, the conversation is novel, the physical intimacy is exciting, and in that calm weather, when everything is easy and frictionless, almost everyone appears securely attached. You feel confident, you look in the mirror and think, wow, I have done so much personal growth, I am so chill, I am a perfectly secure dater.
And it is one of the most dangerous illusions in the human experience.
Right? An illusion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You feel secure because your attachment system is currently quiet. It hasn't been tested. The specific environmental conditions required to activate your core childhood wounds simply haven't arrived yet. The weather is sunny. But we have to recognize that modern dating is defined by one overwhelming, inescapable element: ambiguity.
Right. It's the total lack of definition.
Exactly. Think about the contrast. In a long-term committed relationship, you have established agreements. You have a shared history of trust. You have rules of engagement for how you handle conflict. If your spouse is 3 hours late to text you back, you might be annoyed, or you might worry they got into a car accident. But you don't instantly assume they are abandoning the marriage.
Because there's foundation.
Right. But in the early dating phase, you have none of that infrastructure. You are essentially trying to build a suspension bridge in the pitch black over a canyon with a total stranger who may or may not even be holding their end of the rope. It is pure ambiguity.
That is a terrifying mental image. And then, inevitably, the weather changes.
It always does.
That is when the illusion of the chill, secure dater completely shatters. And what does the weather change look like? It's usually something small, you know? A text message goes unanswered for 5 or 6 hours. A date gets rescheduled for next week, and they give a slightly vague excuse about being super slammed at work. Or maybe you are hanging out and their tone just shifts.
Just a millimeter of distance.
Exactly. They seem a little distant, a little less enthusiastic than they were the week before. Suddenly, that delayed text is no longer just a logistical hiccup. It is not just, oh, they must be in a meeting. Your body registers it as a 5-alarm fire. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets shallow, and you fall into an absolute panic. Why?
To understand the why, we have to look at the neurobiology of that fire. Your attachment system, your internal blueprint for how you relate to others, is not some abstract personality trait you get from taking a quiz on the internet.
Like a BuzzFeed quiz or something.
Exactly. It's not a personality quirk. It is a literal physical survival mechanism embedded deep within your limbic system. And we have to remember the limbic system's primary job. For hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary history, the limbic system's core function has been to keep you closely connected to the specific people you depend on for survival.
Because going back to when we were infants, connection wasn't just a nice emotional bonus. It literally meant life or death. If your primary caregiver dropped you or wandered off or didn't respond to your cries for food and warmth, you wouldn't survive the night.
Exactly.
Your nervous system learned very early on that proximity to a caregiver equals life and distance equals death.
Precisely. The brain is an associative machine, and the limbic system is incredibly conservative when it comes to risk. So when a modern romantic partner pulls away slightly, when they send that vague text or take 6 hours to reply, your brain does not just react to the current, mildly annoying situation. The limbic system acts as a time machine.
I love that phrase, the biological time machine.
It is incredibly accurate. When the limbic system senses distance, it bypasses your rational understanding of the year 2026. It time travels backward, accessing the original unhealed childhood wounds of abandonment stored in your hippocampus. It forcefully merges the past and the present.
So it's not even about the person you're dating right now.
Right. So your body isn't reacting to a guy named Dave taking too long to text back. Your body is reacting to that slow text as if it were an imminent life or death threat. Because to your primal infant brain, an unresponsive figure means you are going to die.
That explains so much.
This is why your reaction feels entirely disproportionate to the actual event. You feel crazy because your rational mind knows a delayed text isn't a big deal, but your body is screaming in terror. The reaction is disproportionate because it was never just about Dave. It is about every single moment of abandonment, neglect, or inconsistency your nervous system has ever recorded.
This brings up what I like to call the gasoline problem.
Mhm.
Let's say you were in the middle of that limbic panic. Your chest is tight, you are staring at the read receipt on your phone, and your brain is spiraling. What do your well-meaning friends tell you to do?
Just play it cool.
Yes. They say, hey, just play it cool. Don't text back right away. Relax. You've only been on 2 dates. Don't look desperate. But telling someone to just play it cool when their attachment system has been triggered into a life or death survival response is like telling someone to fix a minor software bug while their computer's physical hardware is literally engulfed in flames. You simply cannot do it.
You absolutely cannot. And the neuroscience explains exactly why. When the amygdala, the brain's threat detector, sounds that 5-alarm fire, it triggers a flood of cortisol and adrenaline. This chemical cascade effectively shuts down the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, the prefrontal cortex, that's the logic center, right?
Yes. It is the evolutionary newest part of the brain. It's located right behind your forehead, and it is responsible for logic, reason, forward planning, and crucially, emotional regulation. It is the part of your brain that knows how to play it cool. But in a survival state, the brain routes all energy away from the slow, analytical prefrontal cortex and sends it to the fast, reactive limbic system. The logical brain goes entirely offline.
So your friend's advice to just think about it rationally is literally impossible because the biological machinery required for rational thought has been temporarily disconnected.
Completely unplugged.
Trying to force logic onto a limbic panic is just throwing gasoline on the fire. It makes you feel worse because you are failing to be logical, which adds shame to the panic.
Exactly. Your friend's advice assumes you have a regulated nervous system, which is the one thing you fundamentally lack in that specific moment.
So if we can't logic our way out of the fire, we have to understand how different people are biologically programmed to try and put the fire out. We all develop specific blueprints in childhood for how to survive when connection is threatened. We all have an internal map for closeness.
That's a great way to put it.
I want to break down the 4 primary attachment styles from the sources, because these styles dictate exactly how we navigate the terrifying ambiguity of modern dating.
Let's start with the style that struggles the most with modern ambiguity. The anxious, preoccupied style. In clinical literature, this archetype is often referred to as the protester or the relentless lover.
The relentless lover.
Right. If you possess this attachment map, you are hypervigilant. Your nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for microsignals of rejection. You analyze every pause in a conversation, every subtly changed emoji, every minor shift in texting cadence. You inevitably turn the early stages of dating into a high-stakes report card on your intrinsic human worth.
Right, because if your nervous system learned early in life, perhaps from caregivers who were inconsistent, sometimes warm and sometimes absent, that connection is fragile and could vanish at any second. You develop a core belief that love requires constant, exhausting proof.
Exactly. The anxious person cannot tolerate the gap between interactions. They are the person who drafts a casual text, deletes it, writes a slightly different one, deletes that, and finally sends something, all while obsessively checking the other person's location or social media activity.
Oh, the mental gymnastics.
Their primary goal is to lock down the commitment as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And it is crucial to understand they aren't trying to lock it down because they're genuinely deeply in love with a stranger after 3 dates.
Then why are they doing it?
They are trying to lock it down because the ambiguity of not knowing is physically agonizing. When the weather changes, they reach out, they double text, they demand clarity, they initiate deep, where is this going? Conversations prematurely. They protest the distance.
That sounds exhausting. Now, contrast that with the second style, the fearful avoidant, sometimes called disorganized attachment. This is a highly conflicted, very painful map to live with. If you are fearful avoidant, you actually crave deep, soulful connection just as intensely as the anxious person. You want love desperately.
But there's a catch.
Right, because of past trauma or highly chaotic early environments, your nervous system simultaneously views real, vulnerable intimacy as a profound, life-threatening danger.
It is the ultimate psychological bind. You are starving, but you believe the food is poisoned.
What a metaphor.
It's true. So in the dating world, a fearful avoidant person might initiate a massive, fiery, incredibly romantic spark in the first few dates. They can be incredibly charming and deep. But the moment the connection begins to solidify into true vulnerability, the moment it gets real, their survival system hits the emergency brake.
They just panic.
Yes, they experience intimacy as engulfment or impending betrayal. This leads to sudden, sharp, utterly confusing pullbacks. They push you away to feel safe, but the isolation makes them lonely, so they pull you back in over and over again.
It's emotional whiplash for everyone involved.
Okay.
The third style is the dismissive avoidant, which our sources call the isolation retreat. If this is your map, you place your highest value on autonomy and absolute independence. You tend to view dating, emotion demands, and the needs of others as highly intrusive and exhausting.
The dismissive avoidant typically had early environments where their emotional needs were mocked, ignored, or treated as an inconvenience. So their nervous system adapted by concluding, relying on others is useless. I will only rely on myself.
So they just shut down.
When the dating weather changes, or when a partner asks for more intimacy, their primary defense mechanism against the fire is to retreat. They withdraw into isolation, frequently using busyness, highly demanding jobs, or intense hobbies as an impenetrable shield. They will downplay their own emotional needs and insist with absolute conviction that they are perfectly fine being alone.
And finally, there is the secure attachment style. Now, it is important to clarify that being secure does not mean you are a perfect, enlightened being who never gets sad.
Nobody is immune to sadness.
Exactly. It simply means you have a baseline comfort with both closeness and space. You communicate your needs directly without game playing. When the weather changes, when that text is delayed for 6 hours, you don't automatically internalize it as a catastrophic verdict on your value as a human being. Your limbic system might notice the delay, but it remains relatively regulated. You assume positive intent until proven otherwise.
The problem, clinically speaking, is that the modern dating pool, especially as people get into their late 20s and 30s, heavily over-indexes on anxious and avoidant individuals.
Because the secure ones are already paired up.
Yes. The secure individuals pair off early or quickly exit the dating market, leaving the anxious and avoidant styles to constantly collide. And when they do collide, we see what the clinical literature vividly describes as the waltz of pain.
The waltz of pain. Let's unpack exactly what happens when these specific styles meet in the wild, because it is universally tragic. Let's imagine a scenario. We have the anxious person who desperately needs reassurance, and the avoidant person who desperately needs autonomy.
A recipe for disaster.
The anxious person senses a slight shift in tone, a bit of ambiguity. The time machine activates, the panic sets in, and they deploy what are known as protest behaviors to force the connection back into existence.
And what do those protest behaviors actually look like in practice?
It is the frantic attempt to reestablish the tether. They text multiple times. They try to initiate a heavy conversation to define the relationship. Our sources mention a darkly funny clinical term for this, building a murder board.
No, I've seen the murder boards.
The anxious person takes on the role of a crazed detective. They connect timestamps of when the avoidant person was last active on WhatsApp, cross-reference it with read receipts, and analyze emojis, tying it all together with mental red string to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they're being abandoned. They throw all their energy at the avoidant person to pull them closer.
But here's the tragedy of the waltz. The avoidant person on the receiving end of this frantic behavior does not experience it as a loving, endearing bid for connection. Their nervous system interprets this barrage of texts and demands as intense pressure, a suffocating demand, and a literal threat to their safety and autonomy.
So they feel attacked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is their biological response to a threat? They withdraw further, they stop texting entirely, they retreat behind their shield to protect themselves.
I always ask people to visualize this dynamic as a Chinese finger trap. You know those little woven bamboo tubes you played with as a kid?
Yeah.
You put your index fingers in both ends. The harder the anxious person pulls to secure the connection and drag the avoidant person closer, the tighter the bamboo trap gets, which makes the avoidant person feel trapped, causing them to pull away even harder. It is a perfectly sealed, self-defeating loop. The very strategy the anxious person utilizes to prevent abandonment is the precise mechanism that guarantees it.
Which naturally raises a very uncomfortable question for anyone who finds themselves trapped in this cycle. Why do we keep doing this? Why do anxious and avoidant people consistently choose each other?
Because that happens all the time.
It happens because we are magnetically drawn to the familiar feeling of the dynamic. The avoidant person's slight unavailability triggers the anxious person's deeply ingrained pursuit response. The anxious person mistakes that high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled limbic activation for romantic chemistry.
Wait. So this spark that everyone is always looking for on a first date might actually just be an anxiety attack?
In many cases, yes. The overwhelming spark you feel isn't necessarily true. Long-term compatibility. It is often just your biological alarm system going off because it recognizes a familiar threat. And quite frankly, our alarm systems have terrible taste in partners.
That is so depressing, but so true.
They prefer the familiar chaos of our childhood over the unfamiliar calm of a healthy, secure connection. Calmness registers as boring. Chaos registers as chemistry.
Wow, that desperate biological need to secure the bond, to lock the relationship down quickly and escape the agonizing ambiguity makes us incredibly vulnerable. And that vulnerability leads daters right into what I consider the most deceptive and damaging modern dating tactic of all the mirage of potential.
Oh, this is a big one.
Let's pivot and talk about the dangers of future faking versus NRE, or new relationship energy. This is where so much emotional capital gets needlessly burned.
The most critical foundational error people make in modern dating is prioritizing a partner's imaginary potential over their demonstrated present reality. You fall in love with the 3D rendering of the house, ignoring the fact that there is no foundation poured.
I love that analogy.
Future faking is a term for a manipulation tactic, where someone creates a false, highly accelerated sense of security by promising massive relationship milestones very early on.
We are talking about promises of marriage, naming future children, planning elaborate exotic trips for next year, talking about moving in together, all within the first few weeks of knowing someone.
Yes. They make these grand promises without any genuine intention or actual psychological capacity to follow through. But our sources are very careful to differentiate between two distinct types of this behavior because intent matters.
Right, there are two kinds.
First, there is Machiavellian future faking. This is deliberate, conscious manipulation. A person often with narcissistic traits knows exactly what they're doing. They are painting a glorious future to quickly bypass your boundaries, gain your trust, and secure your compliance or intimacy, fully knowing they will eventually pull the rug out from under you.
It's incredibly malicious. But then there's the second type, which is far more common and arguably just as destructive. This is the unintentional fog of new relationship energy, or NRE.
Just getting carried away.
Yeah. In this scenario, there is no malicious mastermind. It is just someone who is absolutely high out of their mind on the dopamine cocktail of early dating. They genuinely, in that specific moment, feel like they want to take you to Paris next summer. They believe their own hype. The problem is they're making promises based on a neurochemical high that will inevitably fade rather than on a solid assessment of actual compatibility.
From the perspective of the nervous system, both types are highly dangerous, regardless of the person's intent. The manipulator uses the future to intentionally bypass your natural vetting filters. The NRE victim is just loudly broadcasting their dopamine rush. But in both cases, you, the listener, end up investing in a reality that doesn't exist.
But there are ways to spot it, right?
Fortunately, yes. There are distinct linguistic and behavioral tells you can spot. One of the biggest red flags in this whole dynamic is what the sources call the when versus if trap.
Oh, this is a massive one. Listeners, pay very close attention to this. Let's say you are on a second date. The person leans across the table, looks deeply into your eyes, and says, "When we go to Europe next summer, you are going to absolutely love the food." That word "when" is a trap.
It's a huge trap.
It implies a level of locked-in commitment and destiny that absolutely has not been earned by a second date. They are confidently choosing a massive future with you before they even know your middle name, your communication style, or how you handle stress. It is a fantasy projection.
Exactly.
The healthy, secure, grounded approach utilizes the word "if." A secure person might say, "I love Europe. If things continue to go well between us, maybe one day we could travel together." The "if" respects the reality that you are still practically strangers evaluating each other.
That nuance is everything. It distinguishes between someone living in a fantasy and someone anchored in reality. Another strategic safeguard recommended by clinical guides to combat this mirage of potential is the doubling rule. It is an incredibly practical mathematical boundary you can set for yourself.
I really need people to hear this one.
The rule states that you should only plan as far ahead into the future as the length of time you have already been dating.
I love the mechanics of this. Walk us through how it works.
It's very simple. If you have been seeing someone for 2 weeks, your maximum planning horizon is 2 weeks out. You can plan a dinner date for next Friday. You do not, under any circumstances, buy non-refundable concert tickets for an artist coming to town 6 months from now.
Guilty as charged on that one in the past, but yes, go on.
We all are. If you have been dating for 6 months, you can plan a weekend getaway for the holidays. The doubling rule forces you to anchor your emotional and financial investments in the present, demonstrated reality of the relationship, rather than getting swept away by the intoxicating fantasy of the future.
The analogy that always comes to mind for me is investing in a tech startup. Allowing yourself to get swept up in future faking is like a charismatic, fast-talking founder approaching you and selling you millions of dollars in shares based entirely on a glossy, beautifully designed 50-page brochure.
The great pitch.
Right. They talk about changing the world, going public, making you rich, but they haven't written a single line of actual code. They haven't built a prototype. They have no customers. You are investing your life savings, or in the case of dating, your emotional capital and your time into a brochure.
Yeah.
You have to demand to see the proof of work. You have to see the code before you hand over your heart.
And if we step back and connect this dynamic to the broader psychological picture, this fog of potential isn't just about poor dating etiquette or losing money on concert tickets. When new relationship energy and future faking are allowed to spiral completely out of control, when an individual fully abandons grounded reality and surrenders entirely to the fantasy, they can cross a threshold into a much darker, all-consuming psychological state.
It gets much worse.
It is a state where the fantasy completely overtakes the rational mind and the nervous system becomes entirely hijacked.
Which brings us to the deepest and perhaps most intense section of our deep dive, limerence. This is a word that has suddenly started popping up everywhere on TikTok, Instagram therapists' pages, and in pop psychology articles. But it is not a new internet buzzword.
Not at all.
The term was actually coined by a psychologist named Dorothy Tenoff back in the 1970s after conducting extensive interviews about the nature of romantic love. Limerence is not just a heavy crush. It's not just being really into someone. It is effectively obsessive love disorder, or OLD.
Obsessive love disorder.
Tenoff defined it as an acute, unexpected, and completely intrusive cognitive attachment to a single person, whom she clinically termed the limerent object, or LO. And what is truly shocking is that surveys suggest this phenomenon affects roughly 50 to 60% of the human population at some point in their lives.
What is genuinely fascinating here is the underlying neurobiology of the limerent state. When neuroscientists put individuals who reported experiencing intense limerence into fMRI machines to scan their brain activity, they didn't just see the standard neural markers associated with companionate love or pair bonding.
What did they see?
They saw a massive glowing activation in the ventral tegmental area, or VTA.
Bring that down for us. What does the VTA actually do?
The ventral tegmental area is a cluster of neurons situated deep in the midbrain. It is the primary origin point of the brain's dopaminergic reward pathway. Crucially, the VTA is the exact same brain region associated with the extreme euphoria, reward-seeking behavior, and debilitating withdrawal symptoms seen in severe drug addiction.
Like hard drugs.
Yes, particularly to substances like cocaine or heroin. From a neurobiological standpoint, limerence is not a romantic state. It is fundamentally a natural chemical addiction. But it operates under a very specific, restrictive set of rules. Unlike standard Darwinian lust, where the basic biological imperative is simply to spread genetic material as widely as possible with various attractive mates, limerence is violently hyperfocused. In the limerent brain, only the specific limerent object will do. There is absolutely no substitute.
And here is the craziest part about limerence. It thrives on crumbs. It absolutely feeds on the very ambiguity we've been talking about. Limerence does not require a healthy, stable, reciprocated relationship to survive. In fact, if the limerent object fully reciprocates and becomes a stable, boring, everyday partner, the limerence often fades.
Because the unpredictability is gone.
Yes. It actually thrives on uncertainty, mixed signals, breadcrumbing, and massive physical or emotional obstacles. The intermittent reinforcement we discussed earlier is the exact fuel that supercharges the ventral tegmental area. And furthermore, the ultimate goal of limerence isn't even necessarily physical consummation.
It's deeper than that.
The goal is total emotional merging. It is a desperate, starving craving for the LO to validate your existence, to reciprocate the exact intense level of your obsession.
This is exactly where we need to introduce the philosophical extrapolation provided by our sources. Science is incredible at explaining how the VTA lights up, how dopamine creates a feedback loop, but science struggles to explain the why. Why does the human soul possess the capacity for such overwhelming, consuming devotion? For that, we turn to ancient Neoplatonic philosophy. specifically the concepts outlined in texts like Plato's Phaedrus.
Wait, we are connecting dopamine addiction to ancient Greek philosophy. I love this. Walk us through it.
If we look at the Neoplatonic view of love, love is not meant to be a static state. It is supposed to be an evolutionary journey, often referred to as the Platonic ascent.
The Platonic ascent.
According to this philosophy, a human being's capacity for love is triggered initially by the physical world. It begins with the visceral attraction to a single, beautiful physical body. But the philosophical mandate is that love is not meant to stagnate there. The lover is supposed to use that initial spark of physical attraction to ascend.
Ascend how?
They move from loving one beautiful body to recognizing and loving all beautiful bodies, then ascending higher to love beautiful minds and intellects, then loving beautiful laws and institutions, until ultimately the soul achieves the love of the universal good, or the divine itself. The initial romantic spark is just the rocket fuel meant to launch the soul toward enlightenment.
So if that glorious upward trajectory is what love is supposed to be in that philosophical framework, what exactly is limerence?
In the Neoplatonic view, limerence is categorized as a failure of the ascent. It is a tragic short circuit. It is what happens when that profound, God-given spiritual energy, that immense, innate human yearning for the ultimate good and for true completion, gets permanently stuck on a local attractor. The lover's soul fails to ascend. Instead, the individual becomes a pathological slave to a single, flawed, mortal human being.
Wow.
They are entirely unable to progress to the universal. They take this massive, infinite spiritual yearning and aggressively crush it into the finite shape of a regular person who probably forgets to pay their parking tickets.
There's an analogy from our research notes on this that completely blew my mind, and I think it perfectly illustrates the Neoplatonic failure of the ascent.
Let's hear it.
Think of the human soul, or your deepest capacity for love, as a highly sensitive navigational compass. The magnetic needle of that compass is designed by the universe to point to polar north. Polar north represents the divine, the ultimate good, true self-actualization, and your highest purpose. Limerence is what happens when someone casually walks up and stands way too close to your compass and they happen to be wearing a giant magnetized iron belt buckle.
The belt buckle.
The delicate needle of your compass swings violently away from true north and points directly at the iron belt buckle. And the tragic, delusional part of limerence is that the person looking at the compass mistakes this ordinary, flawed piece of iron for the North Star.
It is a profound, devastating tragedy, not just for the limerent person, but for the object of their obsession, because you are essentially demanding that a regular human being bear the psychological and spiritual weight of a god.
Right.
No human relationship can possibly sustain that level of pressure. The limerent object inevitably makes a mistake, or reveals a flaw and falls off the pedestal, or they sense the suffocating intensity of being worshipped and they withdraw in terror.
It really forces you to take a step back and wonder, are we, as a society, culturally romanticizing a neurochemical hijacking? We are conditioned to believe this is true love. We watch endless movies and read countless books where the protagonist risks their entire career, destroys their family life, and obsesses for years over one single person. And the soaring orchestral music tells us it's incredibly romantic.
It's the plot of every romance movie.
But when you look at it clinically and philosophically, it is a total shipwreck. It is just an addiction to a belt buckle.
Which brings us to the most vital and practical phase of our discussion. Diagnosis is only half the battle. How do we actually escape the gravitational pull of the belt buckle? How do we step out of the chaotic waltz of pain and quiet the biological time machine running in our limbic systems?
The million-dollar question.
To survive the modern dating landscape, we have to intentionally, actively reprogram our nervous systems.
Absolutely. And that means we are moving into the final phase of our deep dive, the Growth Lab. This is all about actionable, strategic self-regulation for daters in 2026. Because the reality is, the apps aren't going to change, and human nature isn't going to change. The modern dating world will remain a chaotic mess of ambiguity, ghosting, and breadcrumbs. So how do we actually move our internal map toward a secure attachment style?
The first, and arguably most vital tool introduced by the clinical therapy guides is something called the flashlight technique. Let's return to the scenario we started with. You are triggered. That text message is 4 hours late. Your chest is tightening, your breathing is shallow, and panic is setting in.
The fire alarm is going off.
Your natural biological instinct in that moment is to take your mental flashlight and point the beam fiercely outward.
Yeah.
You shine it directly on the other person. You obsessively analyze their behavior. You check their location on SnapMap. You wonder who they are with. You start building the murder board of evidence. Your entire internal monologue is asking, why are they doing this to me? Are they losing interest? Are they talking to their ex?
Right. You are focusing 100% of your energy on the narrative story that your panicked brain is spinning about the other person.
Exactly. The flashlight technique requires a massive conscious interruption of that instinct. The moment you realize you are building the murder board, you must take that mental flashlight and turn it 180 degrees inward, shining it on your own body.
Oh, that's hard to do in the moment.
It takes practice. You have to actively stop narrating the story about them, and you start noticing the somatic reality of you. You force yourself to name the specific physical activations happening in your body in real time. You literally say out loud or in your head, my chest is incredibly tight right now. My heart is racing at 100 beats per minute. I feel a cold knot of nausea in my stomach. My jaw is clenched.
So you stick strictly to the physical sensations.
Yes. You do not say, I am being abandoned by Dave. You say, I am experiencing tightness.
What is the mechanical benefit of doing that? Why does naming a tight chest actually help?
By rigorously naming the physical somatic sensation rather than indulging the narrative story of abandonment, you force your brain to engage completely different neural pathways. The act of objective observation and linguistic labeling requires the use of the prefrontal cortex.
The logic center.
Exactly. So by naming the sensation, you are manually jump-starting the logical brain and bringing it back online. You are pulling energy away from the amygdala. This creates a microsecond gap between the biological trigger and your behavioral response. It stops the time machine from dragging you into the past.
And it is inside that tiny gap of awareness that the real healing happens. Once the prefrontal cortex is back online and you aren't actively drowning in panic, you can start identifying your core wounds. Your intense reactions to ambiguity are almost always driven by deep subconscious beliefs formed in childhood. The clinical guides point out that most attachment panic can be traced back to one of 5 main core wounds.
You have the list there.
I do. It's like, I am not good enough. The people I love will inevitably leave me. If I allow myself to get too close, I will be destroyed. My needs and feelings are a burden to others, or I'm entirely alone and can only rely on myself.
To discover which specific wound is driving your time machine, you have to ask yourself a very difficult, very illuminating question in the aftermath of a trigger. You ask, when they didn't text me back for 6 hours, what did I automatically make their silence mean about me?
That's the key right there.
If your immediate thought was, they realized I'm not attractive enough, that points to a wound of inadequacy. If you thought I was too needy on the date, that points to the wound of being a burden. The answer to that question points the flashlight directly at the core wound that requires your attention, completely independent of Dave or whoever else you happen to be dating.
This is exactly where the concepts of pacing and non-negotiables become your ultimate defense mechanism. We have to constantly remind ourselves of the golden rule of modern dating. The first month of knowing someone tells you absolutely nothing about long-term compatibility, resilience, or character.
Absolutely nothing.
It only tells you if you mutually enjoy novelty and dopamine. You have to pace yourself to survive. And the core pillar of that pacing is establishing firm, unbreakable non-negotiables. But you have to know the difference between a standard and a non-negotiable.
How do you define the difference in this context?
A standard is a preference. I prefer someone who texts me every single day. I prefer someone who likes hiking. If they don't meet a standard, you can negotiate, you can communicate, you can compromise. A non-negotiable is a fundamental deal breaker regarding your emotional safety.
So there's no wiggle room.
None. I will not tolerate cruelty. I will not tolerate chronic deception. I will not tolerate someone who refuses to communicate or exhibits an unwillingness to grow. When someone breadcrumbs you or subjects you to the waltz of pain, a secure dater recognizes that the behavior violates a non-negotiable requirement for basic respect, and they simply walk away. They do not build a murder board to figure out why the person is being disrespectful.
Transitioning from an anxious or avoidant pattern to that secure mindset requires an immense amount of what is known in behavioral psychology as proof of work. It is crucial to understand that your nervous system is not a fixed, permanently broken machine. It is essentially a biological ledger, constantly recording your lived experiences to update its prediction models for the future.
I absolutely love the proof of work concept. It is like a blockchain for your emotional health.
That's a great analogy.
Becoming securely attached isn't about reading one brilliant self-help book, having an intellectual breakthrough, and magically waking up perfectly confident and secure the next morning. It just doesn't work that way. Becoming secure is about building new neurological pathways through undeniable proof of work. You have to literally prove to your own terrified nervous system that you are safe, even in the midst of uncertainty.
Yes, action over intention.
So every single time you feel that overwhelming, burning urge to double text in a panic, and you consciously choose to put the phone down, take a deep breath, and turn the flashlight inward to name your physical sensations instead, you are logging a brand new entry in that ledger. You are proving to your body through action that a delayed text does not result in literal death.
It is the slow, repetitive, consistent accumulation of those new, self-regulated experiences that eventually teaches your biology a completely different truth. You rewrite the code of the time machine. And this realization brings us to a crucial final paradigm shift for anyone who's listening to this and feeling completely exhausted and battered by modern dating. What if the frustrating ambiguity, the ghosting, the vulturing, the breadcrumbing, what if none of it is actually an obstacle?
Okay, you have to unpack that deeply, because when you are in the thick of being ghosted or breadcrumbed, it certainly feels like a massive, impenetrable obstacle to happiness.
I completely understand that it feels like suffering. But try to shift your perspective to this. Every single trigger, every moment of agonizing panic you experience when a new date pulls away or introduces ambiguity is ultimately acting as a mirror. It is a highly detailed map provided to you by the universe, pointing directly to your own unhealed childhood wounds.
A map to the wound.
Yes, the fact that they ghosted you is certainly a reflection of their poor communication skills and their cowardice. But your disproportionate reaction to the ghosting, the fact that it derails your entire week and makes you question your worth, reveals exactly where you still need to build safety and resilience within your own mind. The ultimate dating hack in the 21st century is not downloading a new app. It isn't finding the perfect algorithmic match, and it certainly isn't finding a magical partner who is so perfect they never, ever trigger your anxieties.
Then what is it?
The ultimate hack is becoming the safe harbor for your own nervous system.
Wow. Becoming the safe harbor for your own nervous system. That completely fundamentally flips the script on how we approach romance. Instead of frantically running around desperately searching for the true North Star in a massive chaotic sea of iron belt buckles, you do the work to become your own true north. You learn how to ride out the turbulence of the biological time machine without burning your own life and your own dignity down in the process.
Precisely. The ultimate goal of this work is not to achieve some Zen state where you never feel the panic again. That is biologically impossible. The goal is to feel the panic rise in your chest, to intellectually recognize it as an ancient, outdated survival code, and to have the internal strength to gently, compassionately remind your own body that the ancient war is over and you are safe, right here, right now, regardless of whether or not they text back.
That is an incredibly powerful, grounding realization, and it is exactly the kind of biological and philosophical clarity we need to survive this chaotic digital dating landscape. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this special 21st Century Dating Decoded deep dive. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from the prehistoric savannah to Neoplatonic ascents, but the core message remains the same. Your biology is incredibly powerful, but your awareness can be stronger. I want to highly encourage you to subscribe and listen to more episodes of 21st Century Dating Decoded to keep building that secure foundation and logging that proof of work.
The more deeply you understand the hidden machinery operating beneath the surface, the less that machinery is able to control your destiny.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to introduce you to an incredible resource we've developed called the Speed Mingles Concepts. It is one thing to sit in your room, listen to us talk, and understand this theory on an intellectual level.
But you have to practice it.
Right. It is an entirely different challenge to practice it in the physical, real world, away from the safety of screens, endless swiping, and highly curated AI filters. The only way to log that physical proof of work is to interact with real humans. I strongly urge you to attend a Speed Mingle event in your local area. Put these exact tools to the test. Feel the anxiety rise when you meet a stranger, and practice the flashlight technique in real time. Notice your body. And hey, if you look it up and there isn't a Speed Mingle event in your immediate area, take the initiative. Contact Speed Mingle directly to become a host or to offer up an event venue yourself. Create the physical space for intentional, high-quality connection in your own community.
It is all about bravely moving out of the digital illusion and stepping back into tangible, vulnerable human reality.
Exactly. We have to build the bridge. Until next time, I want to leave you with this final thought to carry with you. Remain deliberate, maintain protection, and consistently date with a defined purpose. Remember that the terrifying ambiguity of the dating world isn't a threat designed to destroy you. It is a mirror reflecting exactly what you need to heal to become whole. Keep that flashlight turned inward, be kind to your nervous system, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
Welcome to Speed Mingle.
Where making real connections happens in
Stream,
seconds.
swipe, socialize, your ultimate connection network.
Jump in now.
Thanks for tuning in to the Speed Mingle Network.